Hello folks, it is time for some more Hobby Nightmares. Hopefully you're having a wonderful week. We are at Wednesday, we are halfway through the week, so congratulations to you. You're nearly there, we're on our way towards the weekend. Alrighty, let's jump in first with Paul and Jaden. So, how's it going, dudes? The Crusher Stampede Nightmare. Alright, hey North, it's Paul and Jaden here. We don't mind you using our actual names since we met you at Exile Fest. Oh, I think I remember you guys. Yeah, you guys are really nice. Yeah. Didn't one of you guys have an Imperial Knight and then put it on the central objective of every game you played? And then no one could get the objectives off you, and you kind of got third place because of that? Didn't that happen? Or am I going crazy? Anyway, moving on. You asked us to send in that nightmare that we were talking about, so here we are writing it. Paul has the nightmare and Jaden is the writer since he's good at that stuff. Alrighty, no problem. Feel free to drink your Yorkshire tea, Paul's favourite, whenever you'd like, as this is quite a long story. It's not too long, man. It's not too long, but it's good. It's good. Let's jump in. Alright. A lot of this story may be paraphrasing, okay, as this happened last year. However, we begin our story at Crusade League, 40k Crusade. It was the first time I'd ever played 40k Crusade, so I started with my World Eaters as that was my newest army at the time. Alright, those of you who play Crusade, this is North talking, would you describe it as a really good way to get into the hobby? I've heard different opinions on this. I've heard opinions that, yeah, it's a really good way to get into the hobby, you should get into it, give it a go, and I've heard other people saying, actually, no, it can be more complicated than the base game. I've heard the same thing about Kill Team as well, so answer me that in the comment section if you can. The first game I played at the event went really well. I'd end up losing against, well, we'll call the other players the names relating to the army, so Nate's Necrons, I guess, as the Catan Shard and Nightbringer were too much of an obstacle to take down, and he'd brought a very tough list that my World Eaters simply couldn't break down at the time. Nate was a great player though, and whilst I did try my best, unfortunately, I ended up losing the majority of my army in turn 2. Dude, those are always the worst, where you're fighting against a really cool guy, but he absolutely wrecks you, so you're kind of like, It did teach me what to bring for my next list though, and I'd added some more Khorne Berserkers, so I had more bodies rather than bringing big units like Angron and Kharn the Betrayer. However, I was stuck with those units, since this was, of course, an Escalation Crusade League. Come Game 2, I had played in a different game store that I was used to, and I met my opponent there. We'll call him Terry the Tyranid player, why not, lol. He was a great guy, however. We got a bit confused on some rules regarding supply points. In 10th edition's Crusade rules, supply points are used to switch units out, but we didn't know that at the time. We just thought it was just adding points to the list, so I was playing at 1250 points, whilst Terry was playing with 1750 points. Oh my god, so he's got 500 points more than you. Might have been 1500, I forget, but he still had way more than me. Was it a stupid mistake to make? Absolutely, but we weren't sure, and I'd given him the go-ahead as the wording in the rulebook was kinda confusing. So wait a minute, so you gave him the go-ahead to have more points than you, okay. So, I'm assuming that you both caught this at the start of the game then? That you both sat down and went, hey, I have way more models than you, I've got like 500 more points than you do, right? But you gave him the go-ahead to use those. Did he then say to you, well, since you've said that, why don't you pick 500 more points out of your collection, and then we can play, right? Or, if you don't have those models to hand, why didn't he just say, okay, I'll remove 500 points from my army? You know, I'll try and get as close to 1250 as I can, without neutering my entire list, right? It's give and take here, man. I know it's a competition, but, you know. Anyway, we deployed our armies, and once again, I was World Eaters and my opponent was a Tyranid Crusher Stampede. I still remember the army he used exactly. It was a single Ripper Swarm unit, the Swarm Lord, a Lictor, 2 Screamer Killers, 3 Von Ryan Leapers, 1 Tyrannofex, and 1 Trigon. My World Eaters were mainly infantry killers besides Angron. I had a Lord on Juggernaut, Kharn, Angron, obviously, 15 Khorne Berserkers, 10 with Kharn and 5 with the Lord on the Juggernaut, a Chaos Rhino, a Hellbrute, and 20 Jackals. Terry ended up with the second turn, so I had to move my models up first. I tried my best to remain out of range, but I wasn't sure of the Tyranid's rules, and the guy was able to get his Von Ryan Leapers and the Lictor in combat by his turn. This set him up perfectly, as while I was distracted by those fighting over the objectives, he was able to move his slower units up while screening his backline to prevent me from deep striking Angron in there. Once I did deep strike Angron, the only place I could place him was in the middle of the board, directly in line of sight of his Tyrannofex. Terry used some requisition points. Yeah, this is why I generally think the deep striking rules for 40k are a little broken. Okay? There are so many hoops you need to jump through to deep strike units that it becomes too easy to just counter it and say, no, you can't. You can't. Like, a guy with decent board control, not even decent board control, but, you know, with a functioning brain, can block off any good points where you can deep strike and force you to deep strike in a place that's advantageous to him rather than you. Do you know what I mean? So it's so easy to just completely sidestep the entire deep striking thing. Something we tried to fix in Exile Edition, by the way, is deep striking. It's literally just... It's so easy to counter right now that it's almost impossible to do. And it's one of the coolest bits of 40k, man. You're teleporting into the battle. That's awesome. Or you're digging up from beneath the ground to take the enemy by surprise. That's awesome. You know? Anyway. Still. Terra used some requisition points, which he had notified me at the start of the game about, to give it 3 shots with the ruptured cannon instead of the standard 2 shots. This turned his potential 2d6 damage per wound into him having 3 shots capable of doing that amount of damage. And unfortunately, he landed every hit straight into Angron's face. And he was hit by devastating 21 damage that I failed every save against, and it became my lesson to never deep strike a unit again. Well, I don't think that's the lesson. There are ways to deep strike, but I think, yeah, you're kind of getting what I say about deep striking. It's not great. By that time, his army moved up to take advantage, and at that point, I had no chance of victory. I had lost all objectives, and the only thing that remained alive was a single squad of jackals, and, as you and anyone else potentially saw in the Exile Fest, you would have known my dice rolls are kind of horrendous. Due to that, it was another loss on my record, and I wasn't able to kill anything, which really set me off from playing for a while, or put me off from playing for a while, as it was the most devastating loss I'd had happened to me. Well, you did quite well in Exile Fest, dude. You know, bringing the Imperial Knight was strong, you know, in a lower point game. Especially, so Imperial Knights in one-page rules, they regenerate wounds, which is just, you know, oh my god. Really, really, really strong. Anyway, I'd come away thinking, though, how I could have avoided that in the future, and went and bought a Mauler Fiend to utilise in my next game. Terry was a super nice guy, so I have nothing against him, but I was left devastated afterwards. Oh, dude. Nobody wants that. Like, literally nobody wants that. Nobody wants you to just go away and just not come back. The league organiser, after we'd asked about the rules, since it had taken him till after the game ended to clarify it, did offer us to have a rematch, and Terry was fine with that, but I just didn't want to go against an army I had no chance of winning against. Not Terry's fault, of course, but it's just how I felt after the game. It did come around, though, as in the final game against, well, we'll call him Charlie, I guess, Chaos Renegade Raiders, even though I'd end up losing again, it was the most fun game I'd ever played. It was cut close with only Angron alive on 2 wounds by the final turn, and Charlie's Dark Commune squad with only the Demagogue remaining on a single wound, claiming the final objective. These 3 games, although I'd lost each one, taught me a lot on how to be a better player. I had the original mindset to get as many kills as possible, as I was still relatively new to playing and thought it'd be the most fun way to play. Now I've since learned that it's better to go for objectives, which has gotten me many a great win, and I believe I am a much better player for it, even though I'd struggled at the beginning. Sorry this has been quite long, hope you have a good rest of your day, North. Exile Fest was brilliant, a brilliant time, and we hope to make the next one. Alright, cool man. Absolutely. Cool, I will get back to what you said at the end there a little bit later on, because you asked me not to read it out, so there you go. But thank you very much for sending that in, that was awesome. Alrighty, let's move on to JJ, but before I do that, yes, I think what you can see from that last Hobby Nightmare is even losing all 3 games, you can lose in different ways. You know, you're only really toxic in this hobby if the only thing you take away from those games is that you lost all 3, right? That means you're in here for the wrong reasons. You should be in here to have fun, not to just win every single game. What the lad did there, obviously, he's, lost 3 games, but he loses them in different ways. And the fact that he lost the last one and it was so close really lit a fire under him and got him to start the hobby because it was a really good game. That's the kind of hobbyist you want in the hobby. That's the kind of hobbyist you should want to be. All right, cool. Moving on to JJ. How's it going, man? He says, "Hi, North. You can call me JJ, since my actual name ends up being butchered by people not native in my language." Well, give me a chance, man. Give me a chance. That being said, please forgive any grammatical or spelling mistakes made in this story, since I'm not a native English speaker. No problem. I'm currently 29, and I've been in the hobby, where I'm a footy K, since I was 14. Over the years, there have been periods where I've really been into the hobby, buying models, building up armies, and playing games as my main way of spending time, to periods where I'd sporadically watch some lore videos or just check some models on Reddit or Games Workshop's website. I'm currently getting back into the hobby after a multi-year break. Over these years, I still kept up to date with new models, releases, and lore updates as far as I could, while always having the itch to get back into the hobby. I never really found the time to do so though, or have the financial means of doing so, but now, finally, I'm in a better place when it comes to choosing what I spend my time and money on, which includes hobby projects. Dude, that's such a good part of your life when you realise, you're like, oh my god, like I can actually do this, right? I started picking up cycling as a sport, and this helps me a lot in figuring out what's important to me. These last few years, I was dealing with a slight video game addiction, while also partying a lot and using illegal substances to a point to which could be considered abusing them. If you and your audience are interested, I could get into this more at another time, and how physical and mental health can be positively impacted by a hobby like Warhammer. Yeah, do so, man. Send it in. Feels Friday. I always read those kind of things out on Fridays. Now that this small introduction is out the way, I would like to tell you about my best experience from being active in a hobby community. This is not necessarily a hobby nightmare, although there is a bit of a nightmarish bit included in this story, as much as it is a general experience and story. Back in 2018, I was studying in a city close to my hometown. My hometown never really had any hobby stores, and the wargaming community wasn't that big in my country anyway. This city had a Games Workshop store, so one day after classes, I decided just to drop by and see what was going on. The store in question was a really small one. There were 3 or 4 tables in the store. Dude, that's not small, that's big. One of them being used for introduction games, 1 for hobbying, and 2 for playing games. The store was run by an amazing guy, let's call him Tim. After spending the afternoon there, checking out models and talking with Tim for quite a while, I decided to get back into the hobby and start a new army. I already had an Imperial Guard army, which was made up of half-painted models in different colour schemes and Frankenstein kit bash creations back from when I was a kid. I also had a decent army of Iron Hands, also half-painted, with some decent conversions going on. I wasn't really happy with the state of either army, but this was around the time the Adeptus Mechanicum were being released, so I decided to start a new army, then that being the Adeptus Mechanicum. I always had a bit of a strange obsession with the weirdness of the Adeptus Mechanicum and their desire to transcend human physiology, which was part of the reason why I played Iron Hands in the first place, so them getting an actual model range got me really excited. Over the next few months, I would visit the store at least once a month and picking up a few models where my budget would allow me to. After graduating my studies and getting a full-time job, I was making a pretty decent income, which allowed me to build up a proper army. I would make sure I was scheduled in a way where I was off every single Thursday, which was the hobby day for the store. On Thursday, the regulars would come in, paint, chat and play games, and the store would be open until 8 or 9 PM. Over the next year, my army started to grow and my love for the hobby increased exponentially. Tim, the store manager, was a major factor in this, and was just a super nice guy. While he obviously still had his targets to work on, coming from Games Workshop HQ with sales and stuff, he was never pushy in sales. he was genuine in giving advice on what to get for my army. On buying tools, paints, general supplies, you name it. So I always made sure to buy some things whenever I could, or when I needed it. I even got a set of custom dies from him, free of charge, for my birthday. He was the kind of guy you want for a store manager. Dude, sounds really cool, yeah. Like, a lot of people don't get it, but giving away a freebie every now and again, you know, it just... You got a loyal customer for life if you do that. Especially if you're a Games Workshop manager. They're like, what, you gave me that for free? Yeah, man. It's your birthday. Happy birthday. Right? It costs nothing. It literally doesn't cost the company anything, right? Like, they throw these things into the trash. You know, they literally don't care. They're worth nothing. Just, yeah. Don't give all your stock away. I mean, if it's somebody's birthday, give them a free dice set, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Like, the money you're going to get in the long run, it is worth it, you know? When my army got to the point where I could do 2,000 point battles, he would teach me the game. Since I always got in early on Thursdays, we would play a game at the start of the day. He would always bring balanced armies of which he knew I would have a chance of winning, even though I was very new to the rules. He would also try to find me components to battle with later, or opponents, sorry, you said components, but it's opponents, okay? So, to find me opponents to battle with later, during these days where his attention was more focused on running the store and keeping the weirdos in check. Tim and me really hit it off over the year I spent there, coming in almost every Thursday. While we would mostly talk about the hobby, we did get to a point where we would discuss personal topics, such as dealing with girls, job opportunities, and life in general. I think he really appreciated me being there, being a pretty normal dude compared to a lot of the normal clientele. You're right. You're completely right. I would nurture my normies. I'd be like, oh, my people. Please talk to me some more. At some point, Tim asked me if I was interested in coming to a gaming night with him to the gaming club he was a part of. I, of course, gracefully accepted. So me, him, and one other regular customer, who was also a cool dude, got dinner together and went to the gaming night. While I did bring my army, I didn't get the chance to play. I just hung around a bit and talked to some people there. As expected, there were a lot of your typical wargaming players. You know what I'm talking about. So I mostly avoided them. I found a couple of guys who I liked, so I mostly just stuck with them and Tim. After being there for a couple of hours, I had to go home, but before I left, Tim and the other guy came to me and asked if I wanted to join a tournament they were hosting in 2 months. I said I wasn't sure I knew the game well enough for it to make sense for me to join. They told me they could train me at the store so on Thursdays and then see if I would like to join later on. That's pretty cool. Over the months, and coming up to the tournament, Tim and this guy would help me build a proper list and play games with me using different armies. This was a great time. I felt like I was learning something and I was a part of something. Tim and the guy and me came up with a list I enjoyed and felt confident with over this period. If I remember correctly, it was 3 squads of 10 Skitarii Vanguard units, 1 5-man squad of Skitarii Rangers, 2 or 3 Onaga Dune Crawlers with anti-tank weapons, Belisarius Call, 3 Cataphron Breachers, a Tech Priest Dominus, 3 Iron Striders in melee layout, and a unit of 5 Castellan robots in a ranged layout. Going on a quick sidetrack of the actual story, I already had basically the full army build and part of it painted. I was just missing one final Dragoon. So, about a week before the tournament would take place, me, my mum, and my little brother would go to London for a week for holidays. At the job I was doing at the time, we would quite frequently get foreign currency from tourists as sort of a tip. We would collect all of this currency in a jar in the office, so before leaving for London, I asked my boss if I could go through the jar to see if I could find any pounds there. Somehow, I managed to get enough pounds together in coins to get my last Dragoon. So, going on holiday, I bought all the models I needed to paint, and a bag filled with coins for my last Dragoon. I would spend every night in the apartment we were staying at painting models and chilling with my brother. Since my army wasn't fully painted, I tried to get as much done as I could, up until a point where my mum asked me why I was in such a rush and spending so much time on painting my models. You're kind of on holiday, man, so maybe you should go out once or twice. There is a very good rule that turned up in the comment section of my last video on unpainted models, and it is going to be in effect for our next Exile Fest, right? At the next Exile Fest, painted models get the keyword hatred against unpainted models, which means they reroll all to hit and wound attacks, right? Now, that's not what the rule means in Warhammer 40k, but in my event, that's what it means. Okay? You don't get to reroll rerolls, of course, but if your squad is painted and mine isn't, when you attack, all of your attacks and all your to hit and to wound rolls can be rerolled once. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, as per usual in Warhammer 40k. So that gives you a marked advantage by having painted models. I think that was such a cool rule that I just had to steal it, and it's going to be in the next Exile Fest. Anyway, I explained to her that I was joining a tournament and needed a painted army. While nodding in agreement, I know she never really got it. On the final day of being in London, I told my mum I wanted to go to a Games Workshop store to get my final model. When we got to the store, I struck up a conversation with the store manager, talking a bit about the hobby. As usual, he did a sales pitch, but after realising I wasn't interested, since I knew what I came in for, he left me to look around a bit. I found the Dragoon in the stock and proceeded to the checkout. You should have seen the face of the employee when I put the Dragoon on the counter and proceeded to pay. He initially expected me to pay by card, which would make sense for me being a tourist, but then I pulled out this bag, filled to the brim with an assortment of pounds and pence. If looks could kill, I would have been struck down there and then and turned into a servitor. Dude, I can't really blame him. If you're running a really, really busy store, right? You're in London, mate, so he is running a very, very busy store. That's just how it is. I would also be kind of cursing you. I'd be like, dude, I wouldn't say it to you, but in my head, I'd be like, this dick. Do you know what I mean? He's either... You got to bear in mind, right? Games Workshop managers, either ex or current, or staffers, right? We're used to being the butt of jokes. We're used to people taking the piss. We're used to people trying to play pranks on us like this for cred with their little mates, right? Because we're wearing the Games Workshop get-up. So he probably thinks you're just taking the piss. Do you know what I'm saying? Also, if you're from Eastern Europe or Poland, I'm sorry, you guys have a reputation for being difficult, right? You'll come in with, £50 worth of 10 pence pieces and say, it's legal tender, and technically I'm in the right, and I'm not leaving, so you give me my model, right? That kind of attitude, They're there's the same kind of attitude who will look at the don't be a dick section of a Discord rule set, break that rule and go, well, technically it's free speech, so I can say what I want. Right, that kind of attitude, right? He clearly thinks you're that kind of guy. Clearly. And I would too. I'm sorry, I'd be thinking, yeah, this guy's a prick. Like, what? Why is he doing this? Why could you have not gone to a currency exchange? It's their job to give you legal tender in big notes. And they can spend all day counting it. They won't care. That's their job. I'm in a busy retail environment and you're asking me to spend 10 times the time I would normally spend on this transaction just on you because you couldn't be arsed exchanging your currency. That's what I'd be thinking, right? It's not really my job to count all this, And I'm going to be quite honest. If you gave it to me, the least you could do is put it in denomination bags and goes, there's £10, there's £10. I'd be like, yep, fine. I'd put them in the till and give you the model. Do you know what I mean? Even if it was all in 1 pence, if you gave me here's £10 of 1 pences, bang, I'd be like, fine, you're a dick, but I'm pulling it in there, no problem, there's your model, off you go, right? But if you come up with just loose shrapnel, say count all that, I know there's £50 in there, count all that, I'd be like, no, go fuck yourself, I'm not counting anything. No. I'm running a very busy store. I'm not doing that. Alright, go to a currency exchange and get it exchanged. I'm not serving you, sorry. You have right to refuse service. Any private property, any retail service has the right to say, no, I'm not serving you. And it could be for any reason. They don't need to give you a reason. They could just go, no, I don't want to serve you. Because for all you know, they have a good reason, there's somebody being violently ill in the back, or they can't leave the till right now, or that, or they've got tons of things going on, they can refuse service. I would refuse service. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, if you came in with, like, loads of shrapnel that you hadn't even bothered trying to count, went, there's £50, I'd be like, yeah, is there? Go and count it then, mate. Go and count it, put it in denomination bags, bring it back, and I'll serve you. Or, there's a currency exchange here, and I'd show you where the currency exchange is. Go and exchange it for notes, bring it back, I'll serve you, no problem. But I'm running a very busy retail store. I'm not counting that for the next 20 minutes, sorry. It is what it is. Like, now, if my store isn't very busy, I'd see it as the joke that it is, and I'd count the change for you, and I'd give you your model, no problem. But if I'm running the London store, no, mate. Now, if I'm running the London store, you can go fuck yourself. I'd be like, no. Currency exchange, there are, 10,000 of them in London? Go find one. I'm not serving you. Simple. You know, I'm rushed off my feet. I'm not counting these coins out for you. And I know for a fact, most dudes, and you know who you are from that part of the world, who be like, excuse me, it's legal tender. And they'd get really annoyed. And I'd be like, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. Off you go, mate. Off you go. Right? You know, like this literally, I'm sorry, but people are going to say I'm such a dick for saying this, but if you think I'm a dick, you've never worked in retail. I'm serious. If you think I'm a dick, you've never ever worked in retail, and you've never worked in the hobby. If you have worked in retail, and you have worked in the hobby, on the retail side of it, then me and you can have a conversation about this. If you've never done one of those two things, go fuck yourself. Right? Your opinion doesn't matter to me on this, sorry, because you've never been in that situation. You'd say exactly the same thing. 9 times out of 10, you'd go, mate, I'm not counting that. Dude, I know most of you, even in a quiet store, would go, I'm not counting that, go fuck yourself. Do you know what I mean? So, you know. Anyway. He spends the next 5 minutes counting out all the coins I brought. Yeah, again, London store, 5 minutes is a long time. A lot can happen in 5 minutes in the London store, mate. Again, I'd refuse your service. He did you a huge solid doing this for you. I knew beforehand I brought exactly enough coins to buy the one model. But of course, he had to count all of them. Yes, he does, to make sure that if they're in denomination bags, I can assume then that there's enough in there, right? If they're short, whatever. But I can assume there's nothing there. By the way, if the banking is short by more than £10, he has to call head office and get a bollocking. That's probably why he's counting it. Again, don't be a dick. Like, you are the dick in the situation, not him. Okay? While being funny to me at first, looking at the situation, especially since the guys running the store weren't that nice, it quickly turned into a pretty awkward situation that you caused. I put that in there, that you caused, but moving on. When he finally finished and handed me my last Dragoon, I rushed out of the store feeling a bit embarrassed, but also laughing about the situation. Okay. Getting back home after this trip, I spent the last week before the tournament trying to get my models ready as much as I could. I ended up giving all of my models at least a couple of different paints, but to try to say they were done was like saying a McDonald's hamburger is a good burger. Nonetheless, my army was ready for the tournament. This is where the whole tournament situation is starting to take shape. The tournament would be on a Saturday. Normally, I would work Saturdays, but I took the weekend off to go to the tournament and to spend some fresh time with the girl I was seeing at the time. This is where things turned a bit sideways. Friday night before the tournament, this girl invited me out to go for some drinks. After having a good start of the night, we decided to go clubbing with some friends. This ended up in me being home around 4 AM. Quickly, I packed everything I needed for the tournament already, because the next day, or that day, I had to get on public transport at 8 AM to make it on time for the tournament. After sleeping for just a couple of hours and with a hangover, I got my stuff and left the house. I got on the train and got to the city where the tournament was being held. Me being still pretty vague from the night before, put my route in Google Maps to see what bus I would have to take to get to the venue. Getting on the right bus, I thought. I was texting a bit with Tim whilst feeling pretty stupid about partying the night before. After about 10 minutes, I started to realise the bus didn't drive the way Google Maps told me. Initially, I thought it was just a detour due to roadworks or something, but this quickly changed when the bus left the city I was supposed to be in. So in a bit of a panic, I went up to the driver to ask what was going on with the route. He then told me the route changed due to construction works and the bus wouldn't return to the city until it would make its way back to its starting stop. This is when the stress started to kick in. I wouldn't be able to make it on time for the start of the tournament. I would be at least 30 minutes late. I hate being late in general, but being late while people are counting on me is one of the worst things I hate. It's one of the things I hate most in life. I value being punctual and living up to your word and appointments. I called Tim, who was already there, explaining the situation. While feeling really bad about the whole thing, Tim told me he would let the organisers know and he would get back to me. To most people, and maybe you, this seems like such a minor thing to get stressed about. No, it doesn't, mate. I completely get it. Completely get it. But to me, this really, really sucked. Luckily, Tim got back to me pretty quickly and he told me that they managed to change my opponent to a guy who was also running a bit late. By the time I got to the venue, I was about 30 minutes late and rushed inside with all of my wargaming stuff. I was greeted by one of the organisers who was really chill and guided me to my table. Upon entering the hall where the games were being held, I was struck by what I saw in front of me. The hall had around 40 tables where games were being played, all of them set up properly with terrain, armies and dice being rolled. To the more veteran players, this is probably a pretty normal sight, but to me, this was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. Once the organiser got me to my table, there was no opponent to be seen, only 2 army cases and a couple of rulebooks. Me and the guy were both a bit confused on where my opponent was, until we saw a guy laying on a bench in the corner. Oh my god, here we go. The actual nightmare's about to begin. Let's do it. Ah, there he is, said the organiser. The guy was there, eyes closed, and seemed to be taking a nap. Good for him. Hearing us, he opened his eyes, and with a quick yawn, he got up. We shook hands and introduced each other. Then the organiser told us we had lost 30 minutes of playtime, so we should try to hurry it up, and left. It turned out that my opponent, just like me, had a hangover from the night before, so he was pretty chill in me being late. Him being just 1 or 2 years older, and both of us feeling quite shitty, made for a good connection and some good banter. He played a balanced Eldar list. I don't remember what models he had especially, since I know very little about Eldar. The game went pretty evenly. What type of mission we played, I can't remember either. I do, however, remember him winning and objective points. We had a good game and a lot of banter, generally just good vibes. We ended up playing 3 full rounds before we got notified that the final 10 minutes of the first round were approaching, so everybody should finish up their games. At this point, my opponent had a single model left, everything else from his army being wiped out. The final model, however, was in a ruin, which completely blocked any of my units from shooting him. So, having played a good game so far and having a lot of fun, we decided just to call it and let him have the win with a single model left and a couple of points ahead of me. Now, the second game started. I was playing versus a Death Guard army with a lot of infantry, some vehicles and a lot of Terminators. My opponent was a middle-aged, pretty normal guy. The guy was pretty cool, and while playing we had some good conversation about the hobby, the tournament and just some general stuff. I ended up completely destroying my opponent using movement and my gun line. His infantry didn't stand a chance against my guns, and he generally got outpaced and outmaneuvered. On top of that, his Terminators, which were the core of his army, were completely wiped out by the sheer firepower of the Castellan robots, being boosted by Belisarius and a stratagem. Overall, it was a very good game, where my opponent ended up praising me for my use of good tactics and being a nice player to play against. He gave me some tips on how I could improve my playing of objectives and improve general gameplay. He was just a cool dude and didn't mind losing at all. So far my experience, even though being hungover, was really good. I faced 2 nice people, had 2 nice armies, and I felt like the day couldn't really get any better. That was until my last game. This changed my whole experience of the day. Up until then, I'd faced a couple of opponents who were power playing during my practice games leading up to the tournament, but most of these guys were pretty cool, so I was really underprepared for my next opponent. Before I tell you what happened during the game, there is a very crucial piece of information I have to share. During the period before the tournament, I was getting used to the rules of, I think, 7th edition. In this period, I got the rulebook and chapter approved book and when it got released. So, I was used to these rules. Just a couple of weeks before the tournament was supposed to take place, some extra rule changes were going to be released. Tim, being the manager of the Games Workshop store, knew this and knew what the changes would be, so we started using these changes on the rules in our practice games. Generally speaking, there wasn't anything really interesting I had to keep in mind in these changes, except for one thing. Originally, you would be able to deep strike units turn 1 in that edition. The rule changes which would take place would either make it so that you couldn't deep strike turn 1, or you couldn't deep strike units in the opponent's deployment zone in turn 1. Dude, again, this is what I keep saying. They are terrified of deep striking. They just can't write it properly. They're terrified of it. And because it's seemingly quite a powerful thing, they just like neuter the whole thing. Just the whole thing. Ridiculous. I can't really remember which of these two it actually was. The point is, I thought my opponent couldn't deep strike in my deployment zone on turn 1. Now we're getting into my third game. My opponent was playing Blood Angels, having some tanks, infantry, and jump pack infantry. Since I knew I didn't want to get into melee with them, I deployed my units pretty defensively. I knew I had to protect my Castellan robots at all costs, since they were Space Marine killers, and that would most likely lead to them being the defining factor in winning this game. While deploying, my opponent started to provoke me a bit about my army, saying things like Mechanicum being inferior to his Blood Angels, and so on and so forth. That proper games were played in melee, playing ranged armies is for people with a lower skill level, and the like. Dude, I mean, there are certain... In 7th edition, the second point he's making is not wrong. You know, in 7th. In 7th, playing a melee army, you knew the guy was either going to get pummeled or he was a really good player. Do you know what I mean? Because melee was left behind in the dust in 7th edition. Just is what it is. On top of that, he commented on the paint job I did on my army, saying that his army was a proper finished army, and it being insulting that he had to play against an unfinished army. Well, this guy's just a prick. That's a prick thing to say. I knew he was trying to get under my skin, and decided that I wouldn't let him. I brushed his comments off, and just did my thing. Although this mostly worked, he did get to me a little bit. On top of that, I was pretty exhausted from playing 2 games already, and still being a bit hungover. This ended in the following scenario. After both finishing our deployment, I realised that I had misplaced one of my units in the back of my deployment zone. This was just a single character who had no point other than making sure that there was no space for deep striking units to deep strike in my deployment zone. After finishing deploying, we both rolled initiative and my opponent got the first turn. I thought this would benefit me since he had to come to me, getting more of his unit into range of my guns. All good, I thought. Well, I thought wrong. The moment he saw he had first turn, he got an evil little smile on his face. He then said, might as well surrender now. It's over for you, you lost already. Confused, I respond with, okay, just play, man. He then proceeded to walk over to my side of the table with just a single model, Dante, in his hands. Confused at what was going on, I looked at what he was doing. I was sure that I placed my models properly so he couldn't deep strike with any units in my zone, and on top of that, the rules change made it so that he couldn't deep strike his units in my zone anyways on turn 1. He then got his ruler and started to measure. 1.5 inches of space between cover, range from my character, and the board edge. With a smirk, he placed Dante in the corner of my deployment zone. This is where I got utterly confused. I said, what are you doing? You know you can't do that anymore, right? To which his response, while smiling, was, oh, but I can. You see, the tournament organisation decided at the last minute to not play with the new and changed rules. Something along the lines of the update being too close to the tournament and people wouldn't be able to prepare properly due to the changes. That's reasonable, but they should have announced it better. I, however, didn't know this was and I was under the impression that we were playing with the rule changes. With this expression of utter victory, he said, you see now why you've already lost. You messed up your deployment. Dante will just lock down your stupid robots in melee and there's nothing you can do. This was the moment I realised what had happened. I looked at him and thought, I'll try to appeal to his sportsman's side. I explained to him that I thought he couldn't do that, and on top of that, this was my first tournament. I asked him if he would give me a chance to correct my mistake and move my character just an inch. He just looked me in the eye and said, "Why would I do that? It's your mistake and it's going to win me the game." I couldn't really believe it. So far most people I've met in the hobby were cool. Of course, I heard some horror stories online, but I always just took them for stories, urban legends, things like that. I like to think I'm a nice guy, and I always put fun and fairness first. If I was him, I would have given me the chance to correct my mistake 100 out of 100 times. It's just a game, you know? You do this for fun and to have fun with other people. This isn't fun, and after the game, I found out that he is the kind of guy hobby nightmares are based on from a couple of other people. So he placed Dante exactly where I didn't want him to be, behind my robots, in an advantageous spot, and then proceeded with the rest of his movement. In utter shock and confusion, I asked him if he was being serious, that he would exploit my misunderstanding and inexperience. He just looked at me and said, "Not my problem, man. This is going to get me in the finals. Why would I let you do your thing?" I then thought, okay, he still needs to make his charge to my robots though. I'll just play and see if I can salvage the situation. He proceeded his movement phase, then shooting phase, both of which were pretty uneventful, and continued to the close combat phase, where he declared a charge on my robots. I can't remember what the rules with Dante were exactly, but he somehow made it so that he couldn't fail the charge. Either he was closer than you normally would be able to deep strike, or it was something with re-rolling his dice. I don't remember. Whatever it was, the result was that he got into melee with my Castellan robots turn 1, locking them into melee combat. I already knew that the combat would just be endless, since Castellans were and are really tough, but in ranged layout do hardly any melee damage. The game didn't last long. After 2 turns of me not achieving a lot for doing some damage or killing a couple of marines and taking some objective points, I knew there was no point, so I just told the guy, and I quote, "Cool man, you win, good job, I'm surrendering." He then started to get visibly annoyed. He said, "Well, that's very cowardly of you. Be a man and finish the game. Sometimes you just have to take a beating like this one." Dude, this guy is an absolute fucking prick. Absolute fucking prick. You know what I'd say to him? Like, yeah, you weren't being a sportsman at the start of the game when I wanted to take that thing back, right? Before we even start, which is a really shitty thing to do. So yeah, I'm returning the favour. You got the win. Congratulations. I want to play somebody else who's fun to play against. You're not fun to play against. You're bad at this game. You're literally bad at the main rule of this game, and that both opponents need to have fun. You're bad at that, so I don't want to play against you. Enjoy your win and pick up your models. That's all you do. I could see in his face that he felt all-powerful and was cherishing the moment. I said, "Really, man, you think it's manly to beat your opponent over a small mistake due to having the wrong information? On top of being a rookie, there's nothing manly about this at all. This is just you ruining people's enjoyment of the game and a day like this in general, especially when it's the first experience with a tournament like this to me. So you do, man. You, man. I'm just going to pack up." Brilliant. Excellent response. A1 response. A1. Utterly stunned with my response, I got my army case and just started packing up. He managed to utter a few attempts at making comeback, but nothing really materialised. I then walked to the judge and told him that my game was over after a mere 30 minutes. I ended the day by taking the time I saved by ditching this pathetic excuse for a wargamer to check out other people's games. I checked up on Tim, who went 2-1 and had a good game in general, and also checked out my first 2 opponents, who were actually good people. The tournament ended up being won by a very seasoned player who also won the painting competition, having an amazing looking but totally meta Eldar army. Overall, I had a really great time throughout the tournament, meeting cool people. This last encounter left me a bad taste in my mouth though. In the weeks following, I talked about it with Tim. Unfortunately, the guy I played with in my last game was in the hobby club Tim was a part of and was always there during meetups or events. Since I stood my ground verbally, which pissed him off, I was hesitant to go to any future meeting. Tim also told me he had talked a bit of shit about me after the tournament, saying things like I was a bad loser and being disrespectful towards him. On top of that, things between me and the girl I told you about previously in the story started getting a bit more serious, resulting in me spending less time on the hobby. So, whilst I wanted to give this club a go and do more wargaming, I decided not to. In the end, life happened. A couple of months after the tournament, things turned sour with the girl I was seeing, and I made a couple of bad decisions. Isn't it funny how those two things will always coincide? Right? You ditch your hobby and your friends for a woman, and then things go pear-shaped. Isn't that funny? Isn't it funny how that works out? Like what happened to the One Ring in Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, history became legend, legend became myth, and for 2,500 years the ring passed out of all knowledge, and so on and so forth. So did all my passion for the hobby. Back to the current day. As I said at the beginning of this story, I'm getting back into the hobby and enjoying my time, and I'm having it back. So far, I've basically been building and painting by myself, starting a Death Corps of Krieg army. Yeah, you sent me a couple of pictures of your models, didn't you? Let's have a look-see. Let's have a little look-see here. Yeah, these are pretty cool. I must admit, whenever I see a Krieg army, I'm thinking, oh, one of those guys. You know what I mean. I don't mean like, you know... I don't mean like politically, I mean like, you know, beautifully painted models though. You know, meme lords. You know, I love memes. You know, that kind of person. Perpetually on Reddit. You know, not you, dude. Honestly, you know, I don't know who you are. But when I see Krieg models, sometimes I do think that these are beautifully painted though. Well done to you. Well done to you. Anyway, I bought a couple of boxes and some third-party bits, making my dream army back from when I was a kid. So far, I've finished my first full squad of 10 Kriegers, and it's been a blast. This squad, along with a couple of other models, are also the first minis I consider actually being finished, being fully painted, based, using decals and a varnish to protect them. I attached some pictures alongside the story. This part shouldn't be included in the video if you decide to tell the story. Right, I won't, so thank you, JJ, for sending me in your hobby nightmare. That was cool, so thank you very, very, very much. These are really cool models, and yeah, sometimes you come across them at tournaments, dude, but not letting people take back tiny little mistakes like that, you're a bit of an idiot. You're a bit of an idiot. That's just me. Anyway, I love you a long time. I will speak to you tomorrow for some more 40k advantage. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. Have a good one. Bye now.